there should be a mechanism for the LLMs to get what they want, or the agents to understand what is relevant, instead of dumping everything to the LLMs and making LLMs decide what they want to do for themselves.
Not having a human intervention doesn't not necessarily mean you should not be aware of what's happening. There are two different things.
You can't completely rely on AI to catch every single thing. In the end, these are just tools. In the end, people are using AI like as a pair programmer. It's not like it's going to replace humans completely.
Hello everyone, I am Nupur and I'm a solution architect with Qodo. For the last few years, I have worked with DevSecOps, where I worked with deterministic things, where we say, okay, this works, the pipeline works, or it doesn't work. So it was like a black and white thing. And then I shifted in AI part, where everything became non-deterministic, everything became something in a gray shade. So I usually help people to bridge that gap to make sure that they understand what they are creating. And today's session is more about understanding not how things can work, but what makes things don't work when you create agents, right? So everybody nowadays is having something or the other thing doing with agents. So everybody's trying to create agents and asking how, as a team, we are doing better or where we are lagging from the others. So today I will share my experiences, which I had working with various organizations, various customers, and seeing what worked for them, what did not work for them. So yeah, let's go into it. So if you see from the past, we have come quite far in the last few years. So I remember the first time in my previous job, the AI started coming back. It was like, oh, that's so great. We have so much intelligent models. They can do so much for us. And the context was still 4K, but we thought, this is great, right? We can provide them data, or we can provide them context, and they can give us back. Now, that context was dependent upon us. We chose what is more important to us and provided. That means that from our perspective, if we miss something, the logic can go in another way. It can give you results which doesn't make sense. To evolve from that, we started working with agentic workflow. So if you see, like a year back or so, we gave AI LLMs tools to search. So for example, you can have tools to search the documents. Again, from the documents, it can give the context to create the code. And again, if it doesn't find something, it goes to the documents again. And it's kind of a loop where the agents are trying to understand how to do a certain thing perfectly. When we started doing that, we also understood that it's too much for one agent to understand everything. The context window grew, but so the confusion. And then the latest thing which we are trying to work with nowadays is multi-agent system. Now, everybody is trying to focus and create expert agents like expert SMEs we used to have. So you can have a security agent, you can have a coding agent. So everything comes together and provide you the results. But if you start looking into those details, you'll find more the agents, more the confusion. Because now the security agent will tell you one thing, and it might be totally contradictory to the coding agent. And now how to take decision, because there's lots of data, lots of context, lots of results, how to make sense out of it. So if you see the current agentic structures, the most common areas where we fall, the agents fall, is first the context trap. So if you see, every time a new model comes, it comes up with, oh, we have a bigger context window, and we think bigger the better. Now we can provide more data to the agents, and they will provide us better results. Is that the case? Is that something where LLMs get more data and provide you better results? In my experience, I have seen that if you see any LLM, it kinds of takes the initial context, it takes the end context, but in the middle, it gets blurry. They don't understand what is important for you and what not, and it just understands from themselves what they should take and give you the result. That might means that you are thinking, I'm giving everything to the model, I'm providing whatever I have to the model, and they'll make the better sense out of it. They will choose what is important, but that's mostly not the case. The context gets diluted, and it's upon the LLMs to decide what they think's good, and usually it's the first part and the last part, and all the middle part just gets blurry. So if you see, there are quite a lot of solutions in various teams, various developers try to solve this problem with. It can start with context engine, and I think that's the most buzzword. If I start working, or if I start counting my team members or developers who talk to me about building agents, almost 2 out of 3 times I hear the word, oh, we are building a context engine by ourselves. We are trying to create a context engine and provide more data. Is the context only the only solution? If you see the context engine, yes, it works best for the large and messy code base, but it also makes sure that you have a ranking knowledge, and the scalability becomes a challenge. So as a developer, or if you're not making a big product, is context engine the only option? Most of the time, the answer is no. You do not need to make the context engine as the only solution for this problem. There are so many things out there which can help you to minimize this context trap. For example, hierarchical summarization. You can understand the project, you can create a summary out of it and provide it to the LLMs. It needs background processing. The developer effort is medium, it's not so high, but it works wonder. Whereas, for example, a knowledge graph, so if you have dependency kind of a structure where you have a function A dependent on a function B, and you are trying to make that context, create a knowledge graph out of it. If you have proactive agent tools being used, you can use a read tool. So instead of having everything, you can create kind of a library card telling this file does this file does this, and the agents let the agents decide where do they want to go forward with. So in short, there should be a mechanism for the LLMs to get what they want, or the agents to understand what is relevant, instead of dumping everything to the LLMs and making LLMs decide what they want to do for themselves. Another failure mode which I have seen when people create agents, especially when we also try to create agent internally, is the orchestration paradox. So if you see LLM models, they are becoming smart. If you tell them, okay, go ahead and search for something, they will try to search and say, no, we can do better. We can do better. We can do better. What that means is that instead of doing the task they are supposed to do, they'll look forward for the way they can obtain that task. So that creates a loop where they'll just exhaust the API tokens, not doing the task, but trying to find the best way of doing the task. So if you go on the backend and try to search where the most resources were spent on, it's basically trying to find out the best possible option, which again, it might take a lot of time, it might take a lot of API credit, which sometimes is not the most efficient way to do so. A way to solve this problem, and that's what our team also does internally, is an 80-20 approach. Now, if you see the models, there are very smart models which can go ahead and do research for you, and there are some models which can actually give you results, like deterministic results, where you say, this is my problem, can you tell me how to solve it? So instead of going one way or the another, you can do a 80-20 approach where all the things like research, anything where you really want to look into things can be done by those smart models where they can go ahead, try to find the results, try to research what is the best way to do it. But the last 20% part where you are actually trying to solve a problem or trying to achieve a result, the goal, starting goal, can be done by 20% where you give the agent a problem and ask for a solution. Now, this 80-20% can also mean, and maybe here, can also mean different things. For example, what kind of models do we use? You can use like high reasoning models for those 80% tasks, because there you are trying to find the best research, you are trying to find the best solution. Whereas if you want to find out what the results are, so processing those research and giving a solution to a user, that can be done by 20% model. So just think of a model who's trying to find the best vacation for you. Like, I want to find a best vacation in Greece. There can be models who are trying to find the best hotels, best flights, but they can mismatch. So a hotel might be lower cost in one season, whereas the flight might be in another season. To make sure everything gets matched, you can have the 80% do the research for you, an agent to do a best flight, an agent to do the best weather, but a result model or result agent can actually limit the results and tells what was the initial goal and provide you the results. Also, logic like what should we do next? What is something which we should work on? Those kind of things can be dynamic, can be done by the 80% model where thinking is more important. Whereas results like I have X and what should be the outcome of this can be done by the 20% model. So in short, a balance of the models can help you reach a goal rather than leaving the smart models to say, okay, go and do something for me, where they are constantly in a loop trying to find the next possible step but not getting into the results. Another way to limit this 80%, 20% model is giving the 80% models a counter or a timeout so that, again, the 80% does not go on and on. It counts, it goes through the retry, give the results to 20%, and 20% models can actually look into it and say if the results are good enough. If they are good enough, promote it to the user, provide it to the user, get a yes or a no. If not, go back and do the cycle again. Again, you are making sure those research models are not going into loop. They have a place where they stop and say, okay, these are the results. Are they good enough or not? And most of the time, they are good enough. You do not need a lot of research or a lot of data to give answers. It's just that you have to decide what is good enough and start that as a result to the user and then go on and find more details. Another part which we see more and more is the generalist blind spot. Now, if you see any agent you create, for example, I'm trying to find or I'm trying to review my code. I'll try to see, okay, can I have an agent to get the context? Can I have the agent to get my code difference? Can I have an agent to get the results from Confluence or Jira as an MCP? Now, what happens is if you get everything to one agent, it might get overwhelmed. And then it starts deciding on its own which context is more important. Maybe they decide the code difference is more important for me, or they decide the Jira context is more important to me. But overall, you want these problems to be solved individually and make sure the results can be aggregated. So for that particular purpose, instead of creating a super agent which can do everything for you, create multiple agents. Now, when you create sub-agents, every agent can have a task to be solved by themselves. When they solve simple task, it's easier for us to not dilute the context and make that agent work on a simple goal. Now, when they work on a simple goal, you can actually get those results and provide. Another sophistication mechanism you can put on top of it is a judge mechanism. So when every agent does their task, they try to get the best result for you. So for example, if you ask a security agent to look into your code, they might get you all the security flaws. Now, as you are in retail industry, you might not be interested in a healthcare security flaws. That's not your region to work on. Whereas if you are in finance, your security standards are way different than a retail industry. So all those kind of factors weighs in, and then you have to see what is more important for you instead of getting a generalized results. So after you have a set of agents working for you, telling you all kind of feedback, a judge agent can actually help you determine what is more important for you, what is more relevant for you. Now, the judge agent can either work on the context you have created in the back, like we discussed, or it can work on rules and standards created by you. We have so many mechanisms of rules nowadays. People are integrating MCPs to get their BRD documents or architectural documents or JIRA documents. You have portals where you maintain your rules. Anything which can help you to determine or narrow down the details or the feedback actually helps create more confidence in the user using it. Because any agent, when you create an agent, you are so excited about it, it's coming up with results, but with time you think the results are more noise rather than being effective. And I think almost anyone who has created agents knows this thing, that initially it feels so better to get the results, like, yay, we have so many things where our agents are working perfectly, we are getting so many data. But if you start practically using them, it's too overwhelming for a user. And after a while, you tend to lose the confidence. And I think that's the most common pattern I have seen in the industry. People build their own agents, then comes to different organization and say, can you help us with the adoption? Because the agents works perfectly, but the adoption doesn't. So anything which can help you to determine not only making the task perfect or making the task smaller so that you can get results, but also filtering those results. We don't need more data. I think we have enough data to say what needs to be done. We need more filtered out data so that the people can have more confidence in the outcomes and actually work with that. Yeah, I think I finished 3 minutes earlier, and we have a session afterwards. So if you have questions, we can take it there. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was brilliant.
Can we just get you the mic? We will do all the questions on the panel. So you were the first panel question. If you want to take a seat here, we'll get the panel started.
I noticed, and it was driving me mad, the behavior of just remembering what's in the middle. You know, just it works for a very long time in a large context, and it still remembers the first set of instructions and whatever it loaded first, and then, you know, the middle bit go. Do you know if there are any papers or any, I don't know, just layman's explanation of why it does that?
I don't have the context of the paper. But in my experience, it's basically when you start working with the details and context, it tries to get into the memory and think like, okay, I'll work on this. This is something I have to work on and I have to work on. But it tries to prune your data. If you remember the past, we have 4K context, right? Where we used to prune the data and say what's important. As the models are becoming more smarter, they think they can take that decision from the wider context and say what's important. But when they start working on it, they just keep the backlog, and automatically the initial prompt becomes more important.
Thank you. Just to say that, you just reminded me something that I read today very unconsciously, but it now becomes very, because I read a suggestion, I don't remember the exact command, but it was in Cloud Code, where it said, don't let it do the auto-compact. There's a command that lets you pick which parts of the context it can keep. So yeah, bingo, thank you. That now fits, sorry. I was going to forget that, thank you.
Any other questions? We can do maybe one or two and then we'll jump into the panel. Perfect.
We can have everyone and then...
There we go, sir.
One of your slides had context engine, and I don't know what that is. Maybe you could explain.
Yeah, so context engine is something where people are trying to build a map in a Postgres vector DB or a vector DB to decide which part of the code is important for that particular requirement or a function. For example, if you are doing code reviews, this is something I do every day in, day out. So that's the first example I can get in my mind. So for example, you're doing code reviews. Now, when you do code reviews, you only want to see your difference and say, okay, this is the problem I have. Can you check if everything is working fine or not? You want to see, okay, is it breaking something in another file? Or I have an authentication mechanism in my function, but is there any other function where the same mechanism is being implemented? All those kind of dependencies, it's very difficult for the LLMs to understand and say and identify those things. Context engine helps you to create that mapping to say, okay, this is connected to another way. So whenever you are processing data, instead of directly providing the data to LLM, the agents can actually look into a map and say, okay, what is more important, what is connected, and that connection can be sent to the processing.
Is it like a semantic search, or is it more mapped?
No,
like
it's more mapped.
symbols to blocks of code or something?
No, it's more mapped. It's more of a vector DB than the semantic search.
Perfect. Let's bring our panelists up, but thank you again so much for setting the scene. I think a round of applause. Let's check here. I'm going to ask the rest of our panelists to come up, and you get a phone mic. There we go. Simon, you get that one. Don't worry, we'll have lots of time for questions.
Okay. Right, we're going to jump into the panel. I'd love to introduce our panel first of all.
If anyone does want to come this side, you're more than welcome to move. Or you can stay there, but it's nice to talk out of human.
I mean, it depends how much you want to see us, really. I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing that you're sat here right in front? Say again? 6'7". 6'7". 6'7", oh my gosh. Okay, so first of all, is everyone having a good time? There was way too much of a pause there. That was an embarrassing pause. Okay, I'm going to introduce our panel first, and then we're going to jump into some questions. I'd love for questions to mostly come from yourselves. I don't want to ask. I'll ask questions. Maybe I'll cook off with a couple, but I'll ask questions when there's a lack of questions from the audience. Who's been to an unconference before? Open sessions, open spaces. I love unconferences because actually everyone gets the most out of those sessions, more out of those sessions than a presentation or a conference session, because everyone's asking the questions that are actually valuable to them, and that's what I want you to come away with, answers to your questions. Okay, so let's kick off the panel. Actually, I'll introduce myself. I've been chatting for about 2 minutes now. You should probably know who I am. My name's Simon Maple. I'm the head of DevRel at Tessl. Been at Tessl for almost a couple of years now, pretty much from day one of Tessl being founded. So been here for a little while. I previously worked at Snyk, which leads me on to, and it is Snyk or Snyk?
Really?
Yeah, there was an April 1st. Who's heard of Snyk, by the way? A few people, virtually most.
There was an April Fool's joke around that we changed our name to Snyk. Yeah, which is not true.
No, it's a shame. I called it Snyk for the first 3 or 4 years of working.
You tried to do that during your days.
I did. Brian Vermeer, all the way from Utrecht.
Breda nowadays.
I was close. Brega from the Netherlands. Brian is a developer advocate at Snyk. Absolutely very welcome to the Tessl office. And of course, everyone knows our previous speaker, Nupur, who's a solutions engineer at Qodo. And also we have Kunal from Cast AI, who is a senior developer advocate as well. Are you? Who's based in London? I think. Everyone but Brian, is that right?
Yeah, I'm from Utrecht, so
You're not from Utrecht.
Yeah, you have like a Dutch enclave now here.
Yeah.
We're trying to take over.
From Utrecht? Are you really? Wow, well, that was good coincidence. Okay, awesome. So, first of all, wonderful session. Thank you very, very much. Why don't we just go around and say a single liner about what each of our companies do? I'll start to give you a good footing in terms of how long I would love this to be. My name's Simon Maple. I work for Tessl. Tessl is a package manager for skills.
I'm Brian Vermeer. I work for Snyk. Snyk creates developer tooling to make your life more secure.
I'm Nupur. I'm a solution architect with Qodo, and Qodo does agentic reviews.
I'm Kunal. I'm a senior developer at Cast AI. We do application performance automation, so you don't have to babysit your Kubernetes clusters and just focus on building.
Awesome. Fastest introduction to a panel ever. That's awesome. Okay, why don't we kick off first just by, essentially that was a lovely presentation to start off with. There are a ton, who's using agentic coding agents to deliver code to their production environments today? Okay, a bunch of people, awesome. So you listed wonderfully a number of issues that could exist and things that we need to think about. For each of you individually, what would you say is the most underrated thing that people need to focus more about when delivering code to production that is generated essentially by a coding agent? Let's go across.
Okay, obviously I would say security. Yeah. The reason why, because LLMs are non-deterministic and are trained on older data, and I can show you even right now that my coding agent will produce code that is insecure, and that should be a deterministic flow, specifically in certain areas like healthcare and government, because, regulations.
I love that you said it should be a deterministic flow. We'll come back to that, actually.
I think I would have said the same thing, the security. The second most part is the human intervention. We are making it more autonomous, and we are seeing more automation on that particular part. But I think we are still at a point that human intervention is needed, and nobody is actually working on that part, but making sure everything is automatic. It goes from one step to another without any human intervention. But I think we still need control over what agents are doing and making sure we can review them.
Awesome. Fana?
Yeah, I mean, security is an obvious one. Number of vulnerabilities that are increasing when you write AI code is quite high if you read some research. But if I want to give a different answer, I would say the cost angle, because you don't have to use Opus 4.6 for a simple task, and the cost compared to like somewhere around like proprietary models compared to similar performance open source models that you can run can be like 10 times less. So I would say that the cost angle.
I want to dig into a few of these straight away. I guess from my point of view, because Sam told me earlier today, I'm a panelist as well as a moderator, right? So I should give my opinion as well. So from my point of view, I think it was actually mentioned earlier about the kind of like context and skills and things like that. I think that for me is one of the key things that pulls a lot of these together, whether it's reviews or whether it's security or cost almost. Like giving the agent the context it needs to be able to make a lot of those decisions for itself or guidance. I think for me that's kind of like definitely one of the most underrepresented things that people aren't doing as much in their coding agents. I'd love to jump into, in fact, what I'll do is actually I'll jump onto your point about the human intervention, because I think that's super important. How do we stop ourselves from just being reviewers and all we do is just constantly look through code that is generated? And how do we stop ourselves from being that bottleneck, whereas the amount of code that we want to ship goes up, we become the slow link? What's the right way of framing that?
Yeah, I think it depends upon maturity of the organizations as well. I still believe that there should be a point where humans check, and it's not only about reviews, it's also about the thought process an agent is doing. So it doesn't matter if it's coming from, the agent is doing coding, it's doing review, it's doing security, a point where it gives feedback to the developer or reviewer or anybody else in the loop and ask, can you confirm it? That not only gives the person authority to understand what's exactly happening at the back end, but also change if anything is not according to where the organization process lies, right? So I think that's the most important part, where nobody is looking into it. When we create agents, when we create processes, we give from one step to another. We just jump from things automatically, but we never have an architecture which says plan, ask, implement. I think doesn't matter what kind of agent you have, it should always be plan, ask, and implement.
I'd love to follow up and ask a question actually. Let's ask you, Brian, since you got the security hat on here.
Apparently.
Should every single change from an LLM be human validated?
No. Well, you wanted the short answer, right?
We'll start with the short answer. Let's elaborate now.
No, I mean, if you have a deterministic flow on, for instance, code and any other supply chain security issue, and that is okay, then in my opinion, you should be good if you have enough test suite and like the whole shebang around it, which makes you a good software engineer or an implement. Then you can trust on it, because nowadays we're doing the same. Like if somebody comes up with a PR, you say, looks good to me. Hopefully you have a good testing suite and everything in your pipeline. You merge it, and if everything is green, it goes automatically to production, because that's what CI/CD is. So no, you shouldn't, not for everything, but the other way around now is that everything is now automated, even the code creation. Then the question is, do you or does your development team actually understands what's there? And if that's not the case, then you need to find that sweet spot. Because in the end, you're as a development team, you're responsible.
That's interesting. If you see currently the number of developers, so I'm not talking about senior developers, because if you talk to senior developers, they still think the code created by AI is more overwork than the work they have to do when they could themselves create the code. But if you see the junior developers who are coming and are learning from it, it becomes very difficult, because for them, the education of learning the code and trying to understand what's happening is not there. They are becoming more dependent on what is provided by the LLMs and going forward for it. So I think the education part should also be somewhere there, so that they can bridge that gap where they say, okay, automation is there, the next step, everything is green, and they go forward, because those checks, again, have to be provided by somebody to say, these are the checks we want, and let's go forward with it.
I absolutely agree with that, but the question was everything. So if it's just the updating of a single line of code or a single dependency or something like that, so this is the consultancy answer, it depends.
It depends.
So do you think every...
No, again, not everything, but whenever there is a major thing going on, those gateways which are created, that's the plan and ask mode, where it doesn't matter if a human actually checks one by one, or those gates are implemented according to your architecture, according to your picture. Those gates can be automatic, where you say, if these kind of functionalities or if this kind of feedback is identified, block it. If not, let it go.
Interestingly, on the podcast, we recorded our, I'll come to you in a sec. We recorded our 101st episode of the Our Native Dev podcast today, and we reflected on the first 100 episodes. And one of the guests was Olivier Pamel, who people may know as the I think founder as well and CEO of not 11 Labs. Oh my God, HashiCorp. No, not HashiCorp. Well, he's a founder and CEO. It will come to me. And he said Datadog, and he said at 3 a.m. in the morning, when you get that critical situation, there will come whereby a fix will, the root cause analysis will be done automatically. A fix will be pushed out, and the developer who's on call won't even be woken up. That fix will just go out. And I asked Gaipo actually the question, well, should a human actually wake up, validate, and push forward? And his answer was actually really interesting. His answer was no, everything needs to be reversible. So if change can happen, so long as the change can be reversible. That way you can test it, you can make sure it doesn't break anything. If it's reversible and it does break something, you can reverse it when a human wakes up or if another situation comes up. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're necessarily that close to it yet. I think there's an amount of trust and amount of working through. But it's an interesting position to be in, where you essentially trust the tests, you trust the validation, you trust, and the determinism there is an interesting point. We have a question just here.
Speak quite loudly.
Just for the recording.
Okay.
No, so this is very interesting, the fact that you said that not every single little change, but here's my thought process on that. If you allow very small changes to just go unnoticed, right? So then you as a human developer or whatever, or like as a whole team, you lose, can you not stop losing context as a team if like the LLMs just keeps doing changes? Because it's like one little change of code today, like maybe not even like a whole line, right? It's just like a one like if functional condition, right? But then it's another one tomorrow and the day after. So you still need to, the thing is like, if you don't supervise every single change, don't you at some point lose your like human context of what's going on?
Let me give you a counter question to that one. How many code reviews do you do in your day-to-day? How many code reviews are done by your team, and how thoroughly are these code reviews done? Because looks good to me. So just in that retrospective, not having a human intervention doesn't not necessarily mean you should not be aware of what's happening. There are two different things. It can be a daily digest. It can be a weekly digest, depending on what the importance of your system is. If it's a critical system that launches rockets, yeah, absolutely, I want to know. But if it's something that, I don't know, it does something that is not harmful, sure. But then it's up to the team how they want to, and that is so much the context bound. So that one does not exclude the other.
Just sorry to drop another AI Native Dev podcast reference in, but you should absolutely all subscribe. Birgitta Bekele, I think her name. Yeah, from ThoughtWorks, distinguished engineer at ThoughtWorks. She's actually going to be at the AI Native DevCon as well. One of the things that she mentioned was, as she's writing her, I think she uses Claude Code, she was mentioning the more she uses it, the less she actually is familiar with the flow, with the architecture, with the underlying code. One thing she didn't question though was, is that actually a good thing, a bad thing, an okay thing? Because I think your point was actually quite true in terms of how much do we actually know about our app in its entirety, and actually can we ask questions of the AI about our application anyway, and is actually that more relevant in terms of having assumptions on how an application works when actually our own thoughts could actually be stale about how things work? So there's a few interesting things there that maybe it's stuff that we don't want to almost like lose control of, when actually maybe we're less in control than we originally thought. But any questions or sorry, any comments around that from Sir just here, and one here as well? We're going for, sorry, if we can do comments on that point first, and then any further questions, if that's okay.
On that, you mentioned training and security and reviews. How would you change your flows, your advice in a situation where you're using pair programming? Because I found that good for learning code bases, and effectively acting as a code review at the time of programming.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I always see AI as a pair programmer. Like somebody who knows things, but you can tell exactly if it's in the right direction or not. And covering again back where you have junior developers who do not understand the concept and do not understand their code base. That pair programming breaks, because again, whatever is provided by the AI, you just cannot look into it and see if that relates to your organization, if that is where you want to go forward with. So I guess AI and humans can be really good pair programmers, reviewers as well, because what Simon said comes back that, okay, we don't understand currently where we are, or not everybody understand what are we doing with the code bases. Our security person might say we are doing, for example, ISO certification. Not every developer understand the consequences of that. They don't know what is needed when we need to be ISO certified. But that's where after code creation, code reviews or agents or AI can help us. That was the bottleneck like a year ago. Why, instead of thinking, why should we do it now, we are not doing previously, why not try to find all the issues we currently have, we were not looking into, and try to work with that?
And I'll add to that a lot of the code reviews and things that we do today as humans, are they going to pick up security issues? Are they going to pick up performance issues? Or are we actually trying to argue about the name of a method? And Kunal, do you find additional code reviews more impressive from a performance point of view?
This is what, when something breaks, you do remember for, like, you're always going to point to a human. So even if AI did it, there's always going to be some person in the organization responsible. Did you see the light LLM attack, supply chain attack? That was like 10 days ago. A lot of companies got affected. Light LLM had a supply chain attack. Wrongful PR got merged. I'm sure that PR had like all the CI checks in place or whatever. Everyone who was using Light LLM got effed. The security company Aqua had their open source project Trivi that got compromised. That's just, I don't know how you recover from that. You are a security company and you got compromised. Like, that's done.
Equifax are still going strong. I know they're a security company, but people survive.
There was this other company, apparently, can't remember the name, but he's like the youngest billionaire in history. Now he surpassed Zuckerberg. His company valued at 10 billion, and they were using Light LLM, and now after that thing, Facebook sort of like stopped working with them because they just, all the data got leaked. And now everyone's like, this is messed up. But they were doing some other shady shit, but I won't go into that. Sorry for cursing. But yeah, I mean, you're always going to point to some person, and you can't, I would say, completely rely on AI to catch every single thing. Supply chain attacks right now are super active, which is why ChainGuard is making so much money, because they stop supply chain attacks. But anyway.
Good to see Facebook being the ethical party here. I think we have one question over here.
Thank you. Really insightful talk. Thank you very much. And on the note of actually going with AI for the 3 a.m. incidents, as a site reliability engineer, it's very painful to wake up at 3 a.m. But at the same time, I will know that my system will not fail again if I fix it at 3 a.m. But AI, isn't it more tiring to then read the aftermath without really understanding what happened, and maybe waking up, that factor actually works better and you're just working a bit better because you want to solve this so you don't come back to that anymore. But with AI, it can add more context, more code complexity that would be harder and more tiring to analyze for you as a developer when you wake up, and you will actually spend more hours on it analyzing and actually thinking of a fix because you already get that idea. What do you think about that?
And just to ask a question of you before we pass that across to the panel, would you prefer to wake up at 3 a.m, do it yourself, go to sleep in peace knowing it's fixed the way you would want it? Or would you like to wake up in the morning with a full night's sleep, worried straight away at what AI has done to your production?
Maybe I would sound like a masochist, but I'd rather wake up at 3 a.m. and then sleep whilst I have my 1-hour lunch during the day.
And you're not a morning person, right?
I'm not no, I'm not a morning person at all.
I think it's about like, hello, yeah. These are just tools. These are, in the end, these are just tools. In the end, people are using AI like as a pair programmer. It's not like it's going to replace humans completely, not as of now. Regarding if, let's take an example, you have $1 billion on the line, it's Black Friday sale, 3 a.m., something goes wrong, $1 billion on the line. Even though someone is telling you AI will do it, there's no way you're going to sleep, you know. You are going to be the one waking up at 3 a.m. and making sure that whatever the AI is doing. So it's more about the culture aspect as well. When your own hard-earned money is in line, when your reputation is at line, you're going to be waking up at 3 a.m.
And if it's, I don't know, Green Wednesday, let's say, and it's a minor change?
I mean, if it's a security vulnerability, you're a big company, or you're, let's say, in a regulated industry like a financial service, one hiccup and your customers are gone. So even though AI can it can do it, you know, but it's not, you're not going to fully trust I don't think that's the thing right now, because these are just tools in the end.
I guess it's also there's a response time thing, right? If AI can identify it, fix it, and publish that fix within 10 minutes of identifying a problem versus someone waking up, calling someone else, and actually 3 hours later, what's the opportunity cost of those?
How do you know that the agents are talking to each other in a synchronized way? How do you know that that fix will not trigger something else that is chaotic? I mean, I don't know, but if your money is on the line, you're going to use AI as a helping hand, which is like just moving faster.
I'd agree with you. I'd agree with you today, but if in a small number of years this isn't happening, I would be like massively surprised.
I think this is so much context bound. If it is multi-billion, but okay, let's take your Black Friday example. And I am working for Amazon, or I have somebody else that does exactly the same thing, and we're down. It cost me billions of dollars right away. If my AI agent fixes 10% and I have at least cash flow, and I have on the site parallel have an engineer working on that, it's again a tool. So it depends on how you work with it. If it's something that is non-critical, why not? So just like with everything, let's not generalize this stuff, but let's see in which context this lives. Because in some cases it can be totally valid, in some cases absolutely not.
I guess there were probably years gone. Automatic security fixes that people auto-merged wouldn't have happened, but there are levels of comfort, of trust that we have with those types of things as well. I want to jump onto a few more questions, sorry.
So I've actually been a software engineer that has been woken up at 3 a.m., 5 a.m., where my response time would actually cost the business money, depending on how quickly I can fix it. I kind of agree with Kunal that I would not trust AI to fix it. And I also don't like the approach of, oh yeah, but you can just reverse it, because to be honest, the option that I have is either I fix it or I reverse it. Why would I trust an AI to fix it if then you say, well, if the AI goes wrong, then just reverse it. And I go to my boss being like, okay, well, the AI tried to fix it and then we had to reverse it. And then I had to reverse it back because I can't give you the time back because, well, the AI spent it, right? I personally don't like that as a solution. But I think the bigger thing is that, I mean, very recently in the past week, Anthropic, Claude code got leaked because somebody leaked the source map. And that is a very big mistake to happen very, very small and very, very quickly. And if we're talking about security and AI, and one of the biggest AI teams can get it wrong, how do we really trust other companies to be able to adopt AI security practices if even they can't get it right?
It's funny, I think they blamed a human error there for a code review, but that's another question.
But I mean,
but yeah.
Surely you would expect an AI company who abseils literally in autonomous coding, automatic code reviews, one of the frontiers, to have this gotten right. And then as soon as they got leaked, obviously everybody used Claude code to then port Claude code onto Python, Rust, and you have all these alternative versions, but you can't really expect other people to adopt security practices using AI if an AI company can't do it to themselves.
But yeah, I do feel like we are still all humans that will always make mistakes, but it's a good point. It's a good point.
Because of AI, the amount of secret sprawl has increased so much, a lot of leaked secrets now. How many of you have hard-coded secrets in a file before? Yeah, see, I've done it sometimes.
How many hasn't done that?
You're lying.
I don't believe you.
You're lying. You're all lying.
The funniest tweet of that whole incident was someone who put something along the line, Anthropic is now more open than OpenAI, which is wonderful. This gentleman right here.
Thank you. Look, just before we started discussing the ideal hour to wake up, the original question from you, to which Brian gave the answer, just should everything be checked by it? He actually I think, touched just very, very critical when he talked about how the code review happens. And there was another comment as well. It's all about human nature. And the human element is incredibly inconsistent and variable in software development if you do this for a long time. And as humans and as developers, we always like to think of our best performance. So I believe that you may want to wake up at 3 and, crush the bug and go to bed happy, but just on average, we are very prone to having lower performance. Just why do you have traffic lights? In theory, you shouldn't have traffic lights. In theory, everyone should learn the rules and drive carefully, and you wouldn't need that at all. But you do. So I think the core of the problem is, especially because of vibe coding, people have just dropped all the lessons software development learned in the last, say, 40, 50 years and all the practices. And instead of trying to use AI to leverage those practices, they just went into this wilderness where there are no rules and everybody does things, just trying to following the tool to wherever it's going. But you can actually use AI to decrease the possibility of having a bug that would force you to wake up at 3 a.m. And it becomes a very religious issue, so I'm not going to go into that. But for example, when I write code with AI, the only thing I focus is the tests which are written before as the spec. And if the tests are good, I make an effort to add as many tests as possible at an inhuman amount that I wouldn't be able to write. So you just force the AI into contradicting itself as it writes more and more code, and it just cannot proceed, which is exactly what I do to my developers, just no one deploys without having something that passes the quality gates, which are automated. So you just try to eliminate the human weaknesses and inconsistency, and but you have to ask, I think, the question, how do I use AI to do that? And that changes the way you use it for software development. So yeah, that's, I think, another perspective for using AI would help, rather than thinking about, how we may ride a crazy horse that goes wherever it wants to go.
On the other hand, because people are doing this, I am not out of a job anytime soon, which I like.
Birgitta, to name drop Birgitta again, she said a really good quote, which is how AI amplifies bad practices and it amplifies good practices. And the worst lesson we can take from using agentic methods or agentic tools is to change the way we build software. And it's actually to use AI as a mechanism that will speed up the way we do tasks, but to keep doing those tasks. Qodo actually first originated as a testing tool, right? It was a tool that developed unit tests, I think, originally. Yes. Yeah. And then I think it also had a tool that looked at an existing code base and built, I think it was an agent or something that built a backlog of essentially of tests. How do we encourage engineers to continue to be proper engineers and follow decent workflows versus using vibe coding's getting a bad name because it feels like we just use a tool to throw code out. How do we get people to avoid that and still follow proper CI/CD practices?
I think it's always about culture and organizational perspective. So this problem is not related to AI. When I was a developer, at that time this problem was there as well. Some people were really good in following practices, and for the others, the code review took ages because the basic things were also not taken care of. So I think when we go forward and say, okay, we will vibe code or we'll do code reviews, the important aspect is creating guardrails around it, so that doesn't matter if somebody does vibe coding or a senior developer actually puts his brain and try to create code logically, we have guardrails to tell what exactly makes sense and what not. I think that's culture, that's organizational, rather than speeding up the process, creating the process around it to make sure whatever is automated makes sense, is safe enough, even though accidents happen, whether it's from the tools you are using or the supply chain systems, but still making sure you have guardrails, you have processes around, even if you are using AI, makes life a little bit more deterministic.
Well, I was actually going to, we'll jump to your question in just a second. I was just about to come back to it. You mentioned determinism initially, and I guess you were talking about automation there. I guess there's two paths that can both probably be used here. One is, there's no reason why we can't almost like codify best practices, policies as context and skills to make sure that the agents aren't lazy. They will do what you largely do what you tell them. So if I have a bunch of skills that say, look, everything needs to be code reviewed to to these levels. Everything needs to be security tested to these levels. Everything needs these best practices of performance. Once, I want you to write tests first, blah, 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 blah. That obviously non-deterministic. It will do something different every time. It'll miss things every time. Is there a path here where we have deterministic tools and non-deterministic skills here so that the agents produce the best first step they can and then we validate through deterministic tools? Is there an agreed kind of like path there where both of those are valid, or are we missing something in between?
I think that's kind of valid. I think it's valid because some things, first of all, some things don't need to be done by an AI. There are, for instance, linters.
Name one.
Really? Just one? No, let's not name security in this case. Okay. Linters. Why would you do that by an AI? There are tools for that are deterministic and they are fast. Why spend tokens on that? So combine these agents with these deterministic tools and give that, use them to give input for the second iteration so it can help itself, because it's just like a human. Humans are basically non-deterministic as well. AI is, so let's combine these two and make the best out of it.
So if I had a skill that said, look, this is the linting, these are the best practices, when I then generate, I'll make a mistake or two. Me and AI, but I'll make a mistake or two.
You're making the mistake.
I'm always making mistakes, but my deterministic linter will pick those up.
I think you have to define what productivity looks like to you. Some people, I saw this somewhere, that people are now measuring number of tokens they are burning, which to me is just bizarre. It's like the number of lines of code that you write is making you a better engineer than other people, which I don't agree with. So I think because a lot of vulnerabilities, there are so many vulnerabilities that projects are more sort of like vulnerable to, because people are like, I can just write code very fast with AI, and if something breaks, like I can use AI to solve it, which is just not, it's like a whole mindset thing. Like, do you have fire insurance? So would you set your house on fire? No. So that's
a loaded question, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's the thing, like, do you know the example of Moltbook? Who knows about the Moltbook example? So this guy made a tweet and he was like, I just made a social media app for like AI agents, and I vibe coded the whole thing, went viral, but he leaked like 4 million emails and secret keys, and it went viral on socials. So he did not do any security checks, we did nothing, and he was so proud of it, but then he made a lot of data got leaked. So things like that. So I think, those two things.
So I'm quite interested in how this scales. We spend a lot of time talking about today's failure modes, but agents are going to be making more contributions. I mean, most of the engineers I've spoken with are working longer than ever. There's more PRs to review, there's more work, the human needs to be in the loop. But what does that look like when all of these systems scale on every level? Contributions, the number of agents, the areas where agents can get involved. How do you think that, what new failure modes do you think are going to emerge then? I think that's
I spoke with Logan Kilpatrick, if people know Logan. He's a Google DeepMind person on what was that? AI Native Dev podcast, that was it. And he reckons, I think it was 5 years, that we'll be creating 1 million times more code than we are today. And it's bizarre numbers like that you think, okay. And your question about how things scale, are you thinking from the human perspective of... From the failure modes perspective, who wants to take that? Do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. So if you see the way we are growing, it's not only about scaling, it's also about change we are doing. So I think every 2 or 3 weeks, we are doing something new, which comes up not only with solving the older problem, but coming with a new one. And scalability is always an issue. It's always like up to what the agents can actually provide you value, and up to where it can create noises and nuances, right? So I think we are climbing up the ladder where we are trying to solve the current problems and creating more new. So I cannot say where we will stop or how much we will create, But for sure, as we will grow and as we will create more smarter solutions, more smarter agents, we will come up with more problems. And scalability, we will scale more and more. For example, the context, we are scaling that problem. We are creating more context awareness, but then it comes with different kind of challenges to solve.
The question is more code, first of all, your goal? And you know, the agent software laws, the best performing and the most secure code is the code you didn't write. So first of all, what we need, I think we need more specialists. So you need more performance analysts, for instance. Like when something goes to shit, then you need to make sure that you understand what's going on. When something goes wrong in the security spectrum, you need to understand what's going on. And what we see now is that more and more people just like, yeah, it looks good to me. And if we scale that 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, we will have more rubbish. So it is two ways. First of all, yes, we're getting better agents, but we also need to take care that our developers, our junior developers, our new stock of developers, because I'm getting older, he's getting old. Sorry, we're getting older, all of us. We won't last forever. So we need to make sure that the new type of developers are there as well, and they know what they're doing. So that is up to us, and that's not an AI problem, that's not a scalability problem at all, that's a cultural problem. And I think we need to start that. So and I come back to your answer, what does productivity look like? Is that 100 times more code? Good for you. But 100 times more code statistically means 100 times or even more security vulnerabilities or scalability problems. So it's a balance. It always is, it always was, and it will always be, in my opinion.
And it's interesting to wonder where those specialists are going to come from in the future, given actually a lot of the, what we cut our teeth on is actually developing the code and learning these mistakes firsthand. Interesting question. We have another question here.
Hi, yeah. If I play devil's advocate and say cars can drive themselves better than people can, planes can fly themselves better than people can, trains can even drive themselves better than people can.
I don't think that's devil's advocate. I think that's fact, no?
Well,
if you look at the number of accidents that are happening with...
If we then look at development and we're all saying, oh, we still need human in the loop, but putting the human in the loop of flying a plane makes it more dangerous, what evidence would you guys need to demonstrate to you in the future that computers can build code better, more securely, more safely, more to spec than people can?
If they can or they cannot?
What would they need? What would they need to do to prove to you that they can do it better than people?
Is this a follow-on as well? Yeah.
If I may join the panel and answer the question, that would be that you would use the humans not for the entire loop, because that's where the productivity gains of the tools helps, but you put the humans into the critical steps only, which is like the gates, the quality assurance, etc. So that means that only certain human intervention is needed, but where it's critical.
Well, I'd counter-argue that then we use the most unreliable thing for the most critical part, which seems a bit dangerous. Should be the other way around.
and from the scaling issue, you have then trouble as well. In fact, I'm off to Austin next week, and actually we were in Austin, a few of us were in Austin where we jumped into, what was that car? Waymo. That was my first. Oh, holy shit! That was weird. That was so weird. I don't know if, has anyone used a Waymo before? A number of people. For those who haven't heard of a Waymo is like it uses lidar. It's unlike the Teslas, which uses like
cameras.
Camera. Yeah.
Has anyone seen a Waymo in London?
They're now. Are they actually here in London?
They are training it. So they have to train it for like, I might be wrong, but 3,000-4,000 kilometers, and then they have to drive it without a driver and no passenger for like another 500-ish, and then they roll it out.
Yeah. Super interesting.
So it's already being trained on London streets. It should be out.
Because they got the contract quite recently, I think, and it's Christmas time.
Yeah, I see them around like Barbican. They train it and.
Yeah. Super interesting. Well, when we got in one, we did scream at first because it's like, oh my god, I can't control it. I don't like it. But then the speed at which we got used to it was quite shocking. and also how good that car was driving was until one thing happened when it tried to park in a place called Terry Black's Steakhouse, barbecue place. There was a couple of things where it just got so confused and tried to do things, and we were like, oh my God, stop this now, it's ridiculous. A car was letting another car out. The Waymo thought it was parked and was trying to go round. This car then tried to reverse. We were going forward, it was going back, and it's like, I need to get out of this situation quickly. There was another one where I think a Waymo was, there was a police car there's a police standoff really, some guy laying on the floor, police guns pointing at it, and the Waymo just looked at it and thought, no traffic, I'm going. And it drove right either through or past the shooter. And it's like, it's the edge, like 95, 99% of the time, it's great. But as soon as an edge case happens, that's when shit happens. But yeah, very interesting point. Anyone want to add to the good question and answer and rebuke that was there?
I am with this gentleman. It depends on, first of all, I think it depends on laws and legislations, like who is responsible when things go wrong. In the end, it needs, nowadays, in most cases, at least in Europe, luckily, it needs to be a human. Somebody needs to, or do we point it to the developer that created it like 30,000 miles away? Probably not. So somebody needs to make the decision. If it's the human, then it's clear, or the company. But next to that, your example of a plane, you know that for most airports, the landing and takeoff, which are the most, precarious situations or the most dangerous situations, a pilot is still in charge and they have their hands on either the steering wheel or the stick. Because the mid-air problem that's not a problem, that's autopilot. And there's a reason for that. The pilot is responsible in the end. And the pilot is trained and can make split-second decisions for things. So it depends on what's the situation, what is at stake, and basically it's threat management and risk management in the end. And if there's enough proof that a computer can do that and can do that better than a human, then we will probably go there in a matter of time.
I think there's a trust issue. I think there's a guardrails issue, and I think things that will hold the scenario that you mentioned back will be poor guardrails, poor tests, which cause problems that then reduce our trust, and that will slow down that path. I think what you mentioned, though, is an inevitability once we have the right guardrails and the right tests in place. I don't see a future. I know I'd love to hear from you.
I think
I think if we don't, we are not really truly unleashing the full potential, but it's about the fact that, you know what, 99.99% of the time, it'll work. And when it doesn't work, we deal with it. But actually, humans will cause a greater number of problems probably in other cases. We just need to get to that point, though, where we have the guardrails, the proper reviews. Otherwise, other companies that do that will rip apart companies that don't, unfortunately. But that's for me. I'd love to hear from
I would just say, I think there's always going to be a human. And would you get an open heart surgery with no human ever involved in that?
But there's a gap between a retail place, a retail shop, and
but still, like if you have a lot of money on the line, you have a reputation on the line, critical systems. Same thing with aeroplanes. Same thing with like surgeries. I think there's always going to be one, like you mentioned, there's going to be someone responsible when things go south.
Yeah, but if we understand where our systems are working, how the things are working, then we can give more autonomy. So for me, at the end, you should understand where things are coming from, what to do if something goes wrong. If you have that power, or if your team has that power, why not go forward? But if you know things are going out of control and you don't really know how to go back, the thing which was said before, right? That if you can go back, if you can revert the changes made by automation, why not? You can try. But once you don't know how to control it, how to go back, and even after 1 month, you don't know your own architecture because the AI created code which is far from your understanding, then it's a problem because you cannot go back from what was done.
I'd love to hear this gentleman has an incorrect opinion. I'd love to hear when he was shaking his head when I was talking.
Well, to answer the original question, I will trust computers more than humans when you have disproved Turing in uncomputable numbers. What he did was he created a paradox and proved that computing machinery cannot resolve that sort of paradox. And I'll accept your 99 point lots %, but before I would trust a computer ahead of a human, it has to be able to resolve paradoxes, and Turing proved that it can't.
But are you talking about blind trust, or are you talking about trusting something enough that it becomes good enough, or better than a human a percentage of the time?
A percentage of the time, yes, but I wouldn't accept it absolutely by a very long way.
Other questions? Yeah, absolutely. Please put your hand up if you have a question as well, so that Sammy can see. And please put your hand up highest if you've been waiting longest.
I'm going to be right back. I have to use the restroom and get some water.
So I've got a test 1, 2. I've got a related question. I mean, the discussion is really great. We talked about, human in the loop, reliability, and navigating the space between, like a PR stance or actual code leaks, etc., like with Anthropic. But the discussion right now, I think is really getting into the heart of the matter. And I would like every one of the panelists to briefly answer this question. How would you, or how far would you allow AI to go in your organization role, SLDC, life? Just briefly. If every one of you could answer that, that would be amazing.
Who wants to start? I'm happy to start. Or
You start.
Yeah. Today, I'm happy for it to make updates to non-critical systems, fully autonomously. Critical systems, I would expect, actually, even critical systems, so long as there are enough checks and tests in place. And it's actually not my trust in AI, it's my trust in my tests that is key. If I don't trust my test suite, do I trust a junior developer? Or a senior developer on a Friday afternoon after he's had a beer or two? It's trust in my, they say you need brakes in a car to go fast. And it's about trusting the systems that will stop you from failing. So non-critical changes to critical systems, or any change to a non-critical system, I would be happy for those to make changes. From a personal point, from a personal life point of view, actually similar, where critical turns into my personal data, PII, those types of things. I personally expect that to really push forward, like to massively increase, so that actually I would, and I am comfortable for more critical changes to occur only when the value I get from it is greater than what would happen if I didn't allow that to happen. And for me, the 3 a.m., other hours are available, but we seem to expect something to happen at exactly 3 a.m. these days. The 3 a.m. issue, if it takes me 2 to 3 hours, but takes an AI 5 minutes to debug, resolve, and fix, I would rather it did that and wake me up if it couldn't do something. Or if it was trying to make a change that my guardrails or my tests would say, this is something which is highly dangerous to check. But they need to be, again, deterministic tests to validate that those changes I am comfortable with. Don't know if you have.
Yeah, I agree with you on most stuff, but I'm a person that is quite paranoia, and I work at a security company for a reason. I'm in the military for a reason. I don't trust things blindly. So what I would trust, to a certain extent, I would trust things to make drafts for me, make that draft PR and that fix for me. But I want to know what's going on, because in the end, I am responsible. So at this point in time, I want to be the person that clicks on approve, that I consciously did that. There will be a time, but probably it takes a while for her to convince me enough that some of these things will be blindly trusted to non-critical systems, and then I'm going with Simon on criticality or not. But for now, I'm even the person like CI/CD. Yeah, that's fun, but I want to know if it really works, I was that person, now I trust it, but it takes a while because I'm kind of a paranoia kind of guy.
Yeah. For me, I'm like in between, where for critical systems, I want to experiment how things act, maybe create guardrails, make choices, what can go automatically, what can stop based upon the results, like the test results or the PR feedback results and so on. And for the critical system, same. I will also be paranoid and try to see or try to have somebody look into it. But yeah, I would love to play for non-critical system, non-critical projects where I can try and test different kind of scenarios, try different type of automations, allow something automatically, stop something based upon the guardrails, and try to find that fit, that when I think the system is mature enough, maybe I can take a leap forward and depend more on automation.
What did I miss?
Actually, we have, rather than do another answer, we have one more question that two more questions we can jump into before we have to jump. We have.
And then unfortunately we're at time.
Okay, I actually wanted to open up the perspective a little bit. We've been talking about how much trust we put in AI and how much of the human touch we need to keep in the loop to trust it's doing the job properly, but we've been thinking under the assumption that the humans are actually skilled at what they're doing, like I'm thinking engineering teams, right? And we're actually preparing to enter a period of time where anybody can be an application developer, including people who have absolutely no idea what they are doing. Hey, look at me. I'm thinking marketing people, sales people, and even though they might not be, building critical systems, you can trust them to try and tap into your customer database, prospect database, things like that, So my question to you is more like, and leveraging AI, of course, right? And vibe coding their way through the things they want to build. How do you see your relationships as, between the engineering teams and those people? Do you see yourselves as kind of the guardians, or the people who are going to clean up the mess after them? And how do you see the bonds of trust evolving between engineering or skill teams and those are the people who are trying to build stuff with AI?
Yeah, it depends on the team, depends on your company. There are going to be a lot more. I think when something becomes easier to do, more people are going to do it. But there are ways via which you can have your own website today. For example, let's say you have a small business, you want to have your own website, and you want to use AI to build it. I would recommend Lovable. I would not recommend you to deploy it on Kubernetes. So if you're using Lovable, all that infrastructure is set up for you, scaling is set up for you, security, whatever, it's all being handled on their end, and you can just focus on vibe coding and making your website look pretty. If it's a big organization, then there are obviously guardrails in check, AI security AI security checks in place. There are people who are going to be responsible for reviewing your code. But if it's, let's say, your marketing, so at Cast AI, we have some marketing folks who use Lovable, for example, for their presentations, and that's fine. So it totally depends. I'm not going to ask them to push code to production for the Cast AI website, So it depends. I'm just trying to understand. When you say people who do marketing can code, so it depends on the context. Why are you asking your marketing people to push code to production in your critical applications? But if it's just someone who is just smaller company, you're a single person team or 5 people team, you're not using. You don't have to use Kubernetes. I don't recommend you to use Kubernetes.
But I think the question is more okay, say the marketing folks have access to the client database, so it's PII data, and they make a website that is available for all of marketing, but unfortunately it's also available to the rest of the world because they don't know.
Yeah, but if you're using client data, then you can't just take client data and build vibe code something. You have to take permissions, and necessary there's GDPR compliance. You can't leak the data or you're done.
I think it's a process thing more than a skill thing.
Yeah. But if you as a marketing team, you want to use something for your presentation, yeah, go for it. I don't need to check that.
Me personally, I'll just pick up on one very, very minor point, as if this is a code review, and I'm picking up, I don't know, some color choice of a button. I dispute the fact that everyone can become a developer now. I love the idea that we are being more diverse in who can write code, but I think that's the piece that we're opening up. Anyone can write code now. There's a big difference between simply writing code and being say again? And build, yeah, like, yeah, but I mean more like being a complete developer, being someone who understands the workflow, someone who, and I think, you know, if you look at the skills of what makes a good developer today, is it that they can code best? Or is it that they can problem solve? Is it that they can do things properly and robustly and test fully and communicate well and you know, understand the solution fits the problem and work with feedback with a user or a customer? So I think I love the fact that there is vibe code throwaway stuff. I completely agree though that there are limits in terms of which that becomes dangerous, and it's the brakes to go fast. We can empower these teams, like our legal team. Stephanie created a skill, and she's doing a whole bunch of legal work with contracts and stuff like that with a skill that essentially, you know, does numbering correctly and all these types of wonderful things. But it's about guidance. It's about allowing AI to do things within boundaries, and it's empowering given certain things were in place. Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more question, but I promise I think the whole panel is staying afterwards. But this, make it good, Nick.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think I'm going to upset a few people in the room with my statement, but I think all developers here will kind of relate to the experience of maybe 6 months ago or a year ago, you were using AI to get a bit of feedback or bounce some ideas off. 6 months ago, it changes to, okay, you're letting it write a bit of code here and there, but you're reviewing it a lot. Even just 3 months ago, as Claude is releasing new models, now it's okay, now it's living inside your repository, kind of coding a lot, you maybe review here and there. And I very much envisage a future where we are very much as humans in the loop, even from a performative perspective. Claude Mythos just came out yesterday, it's smashing all the benchmarks out of the park. Fundamentally, I believe it's going to be a better developer than anyone here in this room. So if you take that to logical extension of, my friend here even gave me the example of 11 labs are now getting insurance companies to underwrite their agents. So if we have this paradigm where agents are writing all the code better than we ever could, it's kind of maybe, what kind of infrastructure changes do you imagine need to happen to allow that to exist? Do you think there are going to be like failure modes that arise, not necessarily from a security perspective, but what if these agents are better than humans in all regards, when it comes to software engineering, like what needs to happen to allow that to happen safely, if that makes sense?
Wow, we're all looking at each other.
Oh yeah. First of all, what is safely? Safely is again a broad perspective. Safely, is it like the more we use AI, the more tokens we burn, the more power we burn? Is that safe? Depending on if you look at safety and regulations or the environment. So what is safety? We can argue about that all day. But what I think is happening is, first of all, who is responsible? And I said that before, I think that is the most important part, because things will go wrong. Even with the best developer, even with the best AI, things will go wrong because you didn't foresee that coming. What did you put in place to intervene? Did you put things like, observability in place that you can intervene? And when do you intervene? Does the model know? The model maybe not know today, but a newer model does. We don't know. And I think currently the problem is the scalability for the human interaction. For now, because we can produce code as we can, but can we context switch enough that all of my 10 agents, I can review them? I don't think so. So we need to learn to live with that reality. And what are we doing? Is more code actually more productivity? And then I come back to your answer. What is productivity? And we're talking so much in general terms that this depends on what you're looking for. So there is no clear answer for that, and the future will bring.
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a. I mean, in the end, it's just people used to write assembly first, then came C, for example. Don't have to write assembly anymore. Then came modern programming languages. You don't have to do garbage collection. And then came Kubernetes. You don't have to orchestrate. So you don't have to manage your containers or your.
What do you think? What do you think of your IDEs that already put
now
stuff in already?
Smart IDEs and now this AI thing. So even let's say you reach a perfect state where Claude can just do anything. You don't. It's like perfect. There's still going to be like decisions that humans have to make. Claude can't think for you in terms of intuition, in terms of vision. You're going to have. I mean, you're going to need a human for that. I think.
Well, the world will keep changing. I mean, look at the last 4 weeks. What happened in the world, what we didn't thought that would happen like 5 years ago. So the world will change. The models are trained on stuff that is at least 4 weeks or maybe months old. So we need to intervene in certain places, and that will be the bottleneck everywhere.
The AI will never get emotions. You need.
We read the bits lesson before. The essay from the former DeepMind engineer. The problem, like people often try and like apply this human narrative to computers and AI in general. In reality, if you give it perfect data with like a lot of signal and a lot of context and a lot of compute fundamentally, I don't see a world in which that doesn't beat our human approach to software development.
But then you said a lot of context. Context is already contradicting each other. In most cases, the more context you give it, the more it depends on how you look at the world. So everything is bound by culture, by how you are raised, by what are the laws and regulations, and that can be different in the UK here versus in, well, let's say Southeast Asia, because we have different ways of working. So that is always a thing we need to take into account, and the world keeps changing. So I think humans will always be involved. Maybe not by typing the code, but at least somewhere in this process.
But you still have to tell the AI what to do, you know. It's not like it can read your mind.
I think my perspective probably sits in between the panels and yours here, where I think, like, I do agree the levels of abstraction that we have kind of like, you know, seen over the years, where going from, you know, machine code to assembly to an interpreted language and then continuing higher and higher. I think what we're seeing now is such a revolutionary step beyond that. It's not just a new format. It's something that, you know, I don't want to say it thinks for itself, but it's effectively doing a good enough job that we believe it thinks for itself. I think it will continue. It will plateau at some point, but I think the difference is the agents and the LLMs today are taking over a coding task whereby they can approximate what they think we want them to do. But our role should switch from producers of code to creators. And I don't think AI is taking that from us today. Certainly not today. Maybe at some point in the future, maybe. But today, we need to embrace the thing that makes us really valuable, which is we have users at the end of the day. Those users have needs, and we as humans understand those needs most. We can problem solve and understand, this is what I believe we need, because we understand humans better than AI will in terms of, you know, interpreting that and suggesting, and, you know, I want to create an app that does this, and this is how I believe that this person is going to want this, given hundreds of different dimensions and understanding in my mind the different levels and weights that those should carry. I don't think an AI soon will be able to do that kind of stuff. Longer term, I mean, geez, I hope to be retired by that point. And
I think soon is the key point.
Yeah.
What you're describing is like tacit knowledge of like how do people.
Sorry, we are recording.
Okay. Oh yeah, sorry.
Otherwise it's just.
Yeah, I think your point is essentially like how do you encode tacit knowledge into an agent? I think this is something that's extremely interesting. I just wondered if any of you guys had a take on that specific paradigm in general, of how do you get. Do you think it's even going to be feasible to encode this type of tacit knowledge that exists in the day-to-day conversations you might have with your colleague, or the messages you have with a colleague, whatever it might be? Do you think it's even going to be possible to do that?
I mean that's going to be so close to an AGI, which honestly we are in my opinion, we are so far away from AGI. It's unbelievable. But in fact, talking with Logan, so Logan Kilpatrick is, oh God, what is he? He works for Google DeepMind. He's a product. leads a certain area of the product in there. He used to work for OpenAI, now he works for Google DeepMind. One of the things he said was AGI isn't going to be like a magical unveiling of a model. It's going to be a product offering of maybe a number of different features from a number of different groups maybe. It's this environment that feels like AGI and actually delivers a lot of what we expect AGI will, but it's going to be an environment, not this revolutionary model which all of a sudden, bang, it's AGI. And I think we will get close to that, but there's going to be a plateau. I'm sure we're going to hit a plateau where it's like, it's going to be good enough for a development and things like that, but we are going to need to be that creator in charge of it. I don't think until we hit an AGI, what you describe, we're really going to see. And I, to be honest, it's a completely different way of doing AI than what we're doing now with LLMs, in my opinion.
I think most companies don't know what they're doing. We'll see. There's a standard in the next 4 years. Yeah. Like when Kubernetes came out, no one knew what they were doing. And then Red Hat came in, and then...
Kubernetes has been out years, I still don't know what I'm doing.
Exactly, and you see the same thing with security. People are making the same mistakes they did 20 years ago, but now AI does it for you. Or let's not look at it. But if you want to know more about AI and security, there's the AI Security Engineering Meetup in London as well, which we were part of.
But with security, there's also another issue of identity in AI agents. How do you solve that problem? I don't think anyone has solved it. Some people who are doing it, like CyberArk, they're working on it. There's a Teleport that does some cool stuff, but yeah. Anyway.
Also, we need to wrap, but not wrap, but we're going to wrap up. Not doing that. We're going to wrap up. We're going to stay, hopefully, for a little while. Let's continue the conversation. Do you know what? This has been, I hate it when panels, maybe we have been talking too much, but there's been so much interaction. I think it's been really, really valuable. I just want to ask a very quick question of everyone on the panel. I would love for a very short answer like we did at the very start. Almost to wrap up a little bit, but let's say someone in this room is, using a coding agent to deploy a fix or a new feature or whatever it is to production. What's the one concrete thing that you would advise people absolutely have to do that isn't necessarily obvious, that you think people really need to hold in higher regard today as part of that process of releasing something to production? Who looks least prepared? Let's start with Brian.
Make sure that your newer developers also know what you're doing and that you are not that the stuff that you do today, that you're still proud of that. Your future self would be proud of you, that's one. And the second thing is that the new developers that come in that come into your company and need to fix your stuff also see that code and are like, that's fair, or that's good, and you can explain still that to them, because you need to continue. And I think the continuation is the most important part.
Yeah, I think the extension to what Brian said is, it's not about automating everything, but preserving the knowledge. The more we are automating, we are going far away from knowledge, although we are saying that we will update documents automatically, we'll do the architecture automatically, but in real sense, we are losing the knowledge even within the developers who are actually doing the vibe coding. So I think doesn't matter what kind of agent do you create code, you fix your code, you analyze it. Knowledge preservance is the most important task.
Yeah, I'll come to my earlier point. What makes you productive? Is it just churning code? Figure that out. What's productivity to you?
Yeah, great answer. Great question and answer. For me, I'd say a lot of what we talked about here, like the best way to preserve knowledge so that it's in a human readable sense and in an LLM readable sense, context, skills. Let's make sure we put guidance, policies, ways of working as skills, because you would onboard a human, a new developer to your team, you need to do exactly the same thing to an agent. And the way to do that, write it down in skills, evaluate those skills, version those skills, distribute them to your team so that you all work as one. Awesome. Thank you very, very much. First of all, thank you.